She had severe head and facial injuries, severe brain injury, and crushed skull from a heavy object.
In December 1996, this is how the horrifying murder scene of French TV director Sophie Toscan du Plantier was found. Outside of her holiday home in Ireland, her body was found badly beaten, with her head crushed with concrete. An escape meant to be quiet quickly turned into a horrible death scene. This horrifying find set off a complicated investigation that detectives were stumped by for years. There were many suspects and a web of lies.
They had no doubt. They knew it was me. They just needed me to confess. If they had evidence, I wouldn't be here talking to you. I wouldn't have been released.
Yeah. Well,
I know I'm innocent. I have nothing to do with this killing.
But Sophie's son was set on doing what was right and wouldn't give up.
I have my questions, and until there is a trial, I will keep asking my questions.
As the case took many surprising turns, one thing became clear. This was not a normal murder. Detectives learned that the secrets they were finding were darker than they thought as they dug deeper. Before we jump into the full story, don't forget to like the video, subscribe for more true crime content, and hit the notification bell so you never miss a new case. Also, drop a comment below and tell me which country you're watching from. It's always incredible to see how far these stories travel. Now, let's get into it. At 10 a.m. on December 23, 1996, a neighbor named Shirley Foster called the Gardaí in Dublin to say that she had found a body in a rural part of West Cork. Sophie was the woman who was lying there, and her house was on top of a hill in a quiet area with only 2 other houses around it. The Dublin police didn't get there until 10 p.m. that night, even though it was a horrible scene. In the bitter cold, when they finally got to the scene, they saw something even scarier. Sophie, who was 39 years old, was found lying just inside the gate, twisted in thorns and brutally killed with a bloody concrete block next to her. The victim was dressed in boots, pants, a t-shirt, and a dress gown. Investigators didn't know at the time that the scene would become a haunting reflection of chances that were lost. So Sophie had defensive cuts on her hands and scratches from the thorns and barbed wire around the property. The body had been on the ground for at least 12 hours at this point. Her face and back of her head were hurt so badly that not even her mother would have recognized her. West Cork hadn't had a murder in 100 years, and lead officer Dermot Dwyer was in charge of the case. As the detectives looked around the house, they quickly learned that the fact that there had been no fighting inside made the story even more complicated. Since police found blood on the gate and in the field, they had to take the gate down to look into it further. After that, they looked around the house for signs of a fight. There was blood on the back doors outside, but nothing broken or moved inside. The agents noticed that 2 wine glasses had been washed and left on the draining board, but they didn't think this was a big deal. People broke into the house and put the keys in the lock on the inside of the back door. This makes it look like someone knocked on the door, got Sophie to come outside, and then shut the door behind her. It was clear that no one else had been in the house after the forensic team had finished their work and looked it over carefully. Dr. Harbinson, the state scientist, didn't get there until December 24th. Sophie's body had been out in the cold for at least 28 hours with only plastic over it. Because of this delay, a huge amount of important proof, such as the exact time of death, was lost. There had to be a lot of actual proof at that time because Ireland's DNA lab was still being built. The blood found on the gate, in the field, and on the concrete block today did not belong to anyone else. In Bantry, County Cork, a group of 50 detectives set up a case room. Within a 10-meter radius of Sophie's house, they handed out surveys, did interviews, and got DNA samples. As the probe went on, detectives found strange cracks in Sophie's relationships. Daniel Toscan du Plantier, her husband, could have been the main suspect because his life seemed to be going so well. At the time of the murder, Daniel was already seeing a model, it turned out. Some people thought he might have hurt Sophie because he was afraid he would lose half of everything he owned in a divorce. Plus, Daniel didn't come to Ireland to claim Sophie's body, and Sophie had a big life insurance policy that named Daniel as the next of kin. The Gardaí had not yet talked to Daniel in person at that point. Sophie's friends told her that when she went to see Daniel in the south of France after her death, He was so heartbroken that he couldn't even bring himself to go to Ireland. It was said that he felt terrible shame for not being there to protect her. Later, the cops learned something interesting from a family member. Sophie wasn't completely blameless. Her life seemed to be going well, but she had a difficult past that could have led to her murder. Sophie was also having an affair with a guy named Bruno Cabernet, but they broke up a few weeks ago. After many happy times together at the house over the years, Bruno was very upset about the breakup. Sophie did plan to leave Daniel for Bruno, and for a while, they were not together. Bruno did have a bad side, though. He was possessive, and Sophie chose to stay away from him in the end. Their relationship ended when Sophie went back to Daniel after being with him for a year. Bruno did not handle the split well. He mailed her a screw and even hid her in Paris. Because of this, Bruno was at first the family's main suspect when Sophie was killed. His excuse, on the other hand, worked because he was in France when the murder happened. The Gardaí tried to figure out what happened before Sophie died. On December 20th, 1996, Sophie arrived at Cork Airport. She planned to go back to France for Christmas. After that, Sophie went to see a woman named Marie Farrell at work on December 21st, 2 days before she was killed. A mystery person who could be a key witness would soon be seen during what seemed like a normal shopping trip. Marie said that she saw a strange guy across the street watching Sophie. The man was wearing a long black coat and a beret-style hat. Marie saw the man follow Sophie when she left. Sophia went for a walk at 3 Castle Head on the evening of December 22nd, the night before she was killed. There, she met the ghost of the Lady in White, a famous figure in local legend. Then she went to see Yvonne Erg and told her about the meeting. Yvonne didn't think much of it, though. Sophie then went to a pub in Scholl and hung out at the bar with people from the area. She got home around 6 p.m., and her last call with her husband Daniel was just before midnight. No one would ever hear from her again after that. People in the area thought that Sophie's strange experiences might have something to do with her murder, which made the secret of her disappearance even more complicated. The investigation took a scary turn when she met a ghost and a mystery man who was following her. Everyone tried to figure out how these scary events were connected to Sophie's tragic death. Quickly, rumors spread all over the area. The locals were wary of the visitors, and the visitors were wary of the locals as well. There was no one left to trust. At the same time, Sophie's family flew to Ireland in complete shock after hearing in the news that Sophie had been killed. Sophie's family went to Ireland, but Daniel, Sophie's husband, did not. Pierre, her son, had been on vacation with his dad, and Daniel had to tell him the terrible news. Detectives thought that whoever killed Sophie must have known the area well because Sophie's house was so far away from everything else that even people who knew the area well often got lost trying to find it. Guys from Dublin were called, but they needed to be taken to the house because they would not have found it on their own. Sophie bought this house in Tour, Ireland in 1993 to use as a vacation home. She turned this place into a safe haven where she could get in touch with herself and find peace. People in the area knew Sophie well and often called her by her first name when she came to the house with her son. Her family didn't like that she chose to buy the house in Tour. The place was very far away. There was no electricity or warmth, and storms happened often. In some places, like along the Atlantic coast, it felt like winter even in the summer. But Sophie thought of this house as her home and loved it very much. But fate had other plans. This very place she chose for peace would become the sad place where she died. The police only had one important job left. They had to find the mystery man who could finally give Sophie the justice she deserved. There were many leads in the investigation, which led to the identification of about 50 suspects. These were gradually narrowed down to about 10, and finally to just one, Ian Bailey. Weird things he did made him a main suspect in the case, and his story was not like any other.
So my name is Ian Kenneth Bailey. I'm 65 this coming January, and I was born in Manchester back in 1957, grew up in Stockport, and then moved down to Gloucestershire. I went to school there, and then I was writing. I loved English, poetry, and I actually started my journalistic career while I was at school.
2 newspapers, one in Cork and one across the country, hired him. Ian and his partner Jules Thomas lived in a small house they rented about 6 kilometers away from Sophie's vacation home.
I moved over here in 1991. So I was doing various jobs, and then I went full-time, back to full-time freelance journalism in 1996. I'd been sort of building up, and my confidence was growing. I was learning a bit of Irish. And then, so that brings us up to, the Christmas of 1996.
Around 1:40 p.m. on the day Sophie's body was found, Ian got a call from a reporter asking him to write about a French citizen who was found dead in a strange way. It was hard to find Sophie's house because it was so far away, but Ian seemed to do pretty well on the drive. Ian remembered working for a man who had a French neighbor, so they drove to that area because Ian thought the neighbor might have something to do with it. Ian said he had never met Sophie but had seen her from afar when he walked by her house. But later, other people would say they had been introduced. Ian and Jewel were some of the first people to get to the scene. As they got closer, they saw that someone was inside. When two police officers came up to them, Ian, as a reporter, asked if they could share any information. The police refused, saying that the Gardaí press office would have all the details. After Jewel took a few shots, they kept driving to the post office, which is where most of the information in the area is kept. Since Sophie had been killed in January 1997, Ian Bailey was very involved with the story as a reporter. Being from the area and living just up the road gave him access to information that reporters from other places couldn't get. Ian knew that the people in the area knew some Gardaí and could get inside information about the case. Ian saw a chance to make money off of the case because he knew Sophie wasn't just any French woman, but a famous person whose story could get people's attention. Sophie was a famous person who was born into a famous French family. For a while, she lived in Paris with her famous film director husband, Daniel Toscan du Plantier, and her son Pierre from her first marriage. She became famous after she married Daniel. With all the attention and high-profile events, Sophie had never felt at ease. Sophie wasn't comfortable with being photographed and living a busy life because it went against who she was. Sophie was private and quiet. Because Ian knew a lot about what was going on, his story started to change the investigation in scary ways. With his insider knowledge and ties in the area, Ian pitched stories and lines of inquiry to national newspapers. He wanted to get as much information as possible and make the most of the drama as it happened. 3 days after the murder, on December 26, 1996, Ian went to Sophie's house. He went around to the back and then walked up to a neighbor's house, saying he was bringing milk and briquettes, even though the neighbor hadn't asked for them. Not long after that, on December 28, 1996, he wrote a piece called "Murder Sophie's Tangled Love Life," which made people think he knew a lot about Sophie. He talked about the wine glasses, how she was killed, and the fact that she hadn't been assaulted in the story, all of which made it sound like he had reliable sources in the investigation. Ian made it sound like Sophie was promiscuous and had many men over to her place. But people in the area and his neighbors strongly denied these claims, saying that he had no real evidence to back them up. Sophie's family knew about only one guy she had been seeing, Bruno Cabernet, and her husband Daniel knew about him. The more suspicious Ian's story made people, the more his real goals in the case were questioned. Ian chose to blame Daniel for the murder. He said that Daniel was married for the third time and had hired a hitman to kill Sophie. Some people think Daniel is guilty because Ian brought these things up in his report. But a concrete block was used as a weapon. If Daniel had paid a hitman, they probably wouldn't have picked such a crude tool. Ian still wanted to make Daniel and Bruno look bad through his newspaper pieces. On January 11, 1997, the Gardaí got a tip that helped them solve the case. It turned out to be from Marie Farah, who had seen a guy following Sophie the Saturday before she was killed. Marie also said she saw a guy at Kilfata Bridge, which is 2.1 kilometers from Sophie's house, around 3 a.m. on the 23rd. At first, she decided to stay anonymous because she was married and had been with someone else at the bridge.
I am telling the truth now. Why would I put myself in the spotlight like this if I wasn't telling the truth?
On January 24th, Marie called the Gardaí a third time. This time, she used her home phone, which they were able to track. She said she saw a guy at Kilfata Bridge who was flailing his arms around and wearing a long black coat. He looked like he was drunk. In the middle of the following month, Marie said she saw the same man again at work. After she told the Gardaí who it was, they told her it was Ian. Pretty quickly, word got around that Ian was now the main suspect, and the editor of the newspaper Ian worked for called him to let him know. Ian Bailey was the focus of the investigation, but his own statements didn't answer all the questions. Ian didn't understand this, especially since two Gardaí had come to see him over Christmas and seen scratches on his arms and one near his temples.
Right, well, there wasn't any scratch on my forehead. I had a little nick on the top of my head, which was actually in my hair, so it wasn't visible, and that was from a turkey, which I'd slaughtered on the Sunday before the crime was discovered on the Monday. I also saw the top off a Christmas tree, which I drew down through the tree, and I got some light markings on my arms from that.
Even with these reasons, the Gardaí only drew pictures of his injuries instead of taking pictures. Detective Dermot Dwyer went to see Ian in January 1997. Dwyer said that Ian was a strong man who was 6 feet 3 inches tall, spoke clearly, and was full of confidence. Dwyer asked Ian at one point who he thought had killed Sophie. Ian answered that he thought it was a hitman Daniel had hired in France. I then asked Dwyer the same question, and he said he thought it was a neighborhood man, whom he called a head case. He also said he had a good idea of who was to blame, but he didn't say who it was. In Ian's case, his past also played a part. It was said that he was back on his feet when he married his first wife, Sarah, in 1980. But they were only married for 5 years, and the breakup had a big effect on Ian and changed him a lot. Ian had nothing left after his marriage ended, and he seemed to have lost his way. He finally decided to go to Ireland in search of peace in the quiet countryside. Ian was an interesting and controversial figure in the probe because of how striking he was and how troubled his past was. When Ian got to Shull, he made an effect on the people there right away. People were drawn to him everywhere he went because of how well he spoke and how powerful he seemed. But as the people there got used to him, they thought Ian was a little odd. He was too sure of himself, acting out, and even a little mean. Folks in the town didn't like Ian, but that didn't mean he was a killer. On the morning of February 10th, 1997, however, he was caught in his own home for the murder of Sophie Toscan du Plantier.
I was arrested. I was taken to the barrack. Immediately, the hostility in the vehicle began. There was at least one cameraman already there. I was photographed being taken into the station, and I was in a state of absolute shock, being told, you did it, you did it.
He was handcuffed and taken to an empty station where he was questioned in great detail for 12 hours. So the Gardaí had to count on people being honest because there were no digital fingerprints back then. Ian said he didn't find out about it until 1:40 p.m. on the day it happened, but people he talked to earlier in the morning said he knew earlier. Some people even said he called to cancel turkey deliveries because he had to report a murder, which was not at all what he told the Gardaí. Ian got to the scene of the crime at 2:20 p.m. on the day Sophie's body was found. The Gardaí who were there say he didn't ask any questions and quickly left. It was very strange for a writer to act this way. While Ian was being questioned, the Gardaí searched his home but didn't find anything that could be used against him. But they did find a burned-out area in the back of the studio Ian had rented before he and Jules Thomas moved into the main house. On December 26, 1996, 3 days after the murder, a woman who was out for a walk said she saw a fire in the back of the studio. When asked by the Gardaí, Ian said the last fire there was in early December and that nothing had been burned since then. No hard proof was found, even though an investigation was done. After Ian was caught, Jules was the next person to be questioned. When a bar officially closes, some people are allowed to stay behind and drink without permission. Jules told the Gardaí that they were at the Galleon Inn on the night of December 22nd and left around 12:30 a.m. after a lock-in. They stopped at a lookout point called H Hill on their way home so they could see Sophie's house and the neighbor's lights on. Ian suggested that they go to the neighbor's house because he thought there might be a party going on. Then he said something strange. He had a bad feeling that something bad was going to happen that night. After that, Jules told Ian to get back in the car, and the two of them drove home. It was late when they got there, so Ian got up in the middle of the night and said he had to finish something. At first, he lied and said he had stayed in bed all night, but Jules told him he was wrong. Ian changed his story when he was told this and said that he had also gone down to the studio, which was about 250 yards away. He brought Jules a coffee the next morning at 9 a.m., which was the first time she saw him. He had a fresh cut on his head, but she said in another interview that she didn't see it until after Sophie's body was found the next morning. It was possible for the Gardaí to get a statement, but Ian had kept quiet. At 10 p.m. that same night, Jules was also freed because the police only had weak proof against him. Ian was not happy when he saw himself in the media the next day. After telling the stories, the man who used to report them was now the story, and it was a bad one. After the murder, Ian was seen running around in his pants, yelling at the moon, and telling people he had a magic stick. The news stories were getting more and more unbelievable. Some even said that Ian had told several people that he had killed Sophie, but he later denied these claims.
Well, I've never, if you look at the DPP's critique, he refers to the alleged informal admissions, and he actually says in the report that there were not admissions at all. They were clearly indicative of my dark sense of humour and actually were more probative of my innocence.
Ian Bailey was caught again on January 27, 1998, and was held for another 12 hours. Irish law says that the Gardaí wouldn't be able to talk to him a third time unless they planned to charge him. The Gardaí brought Ian in again, thinking that he would confess, but he was let go without being charged. Then Ian tried a different approach. He let the media into his house and strongly denied being guilty.
I gave a sample of hair. I had hair pulled from as did my partner, and we gave it. It was made absolutely certain to me by all my interrogating officers that I was the murderer. They had no doubt. They knew it was me. They just needed me to confess. If they had evidence, I wouldn't be here talking to you. I wouldn't have been released.
Yeah. Well,
I know I'm innocent. I have nothing to do with this killing.
Did you kill? Vous l'avez tué?
No.
Ian sued several newspapers for libel in 2003, which sparked new interest in Sophie's death. Witnesses were called, and the trial revealed shocking details, such as Ian's attempt to scare key witness Marie Farrell by confronting her in her shop and demanding she take back what she said. It was also revealed that he had beaten up his partner Jules Thomas. The worst attack happened 6 months before Sophie was killed and almost lost Jules and I. Ian was first given €8,000 in damages, but later settled for €70,000, and the newspapers paid for his lawyer's fees. The trial's findings changed how people thought about Ian in new ways. Then Sophie's family tried to get justice by going to France to have a hearing. Ireland refused to extradite Ian because there wasn't enough evidence, but the French government chose to bring him to justice based on the evidence they had. The French investigation, which began in 2008, went on even after Marie Farrell, a key witness, changed her story. Under pressure from the Gardaí, Marie Farrell initially gave the wrong name to Ian. The Gardaí then handled the probe badly and lost evidence. The Gardaí's case against Ian fell apart when she changed her mind. There were many mistakes in the probe. The crime scene wasn't properly kept, the state pathologist didn't show up for 28 hours, and important evidence like a bottle of wine and a big bloody gate had been lost. There wasn't a name parade after Marie Farrell was seen, which made people even more suspicious about how the case was being handled. However, years later, Ariana Barina, a close friend of Ian's daughter who had flown in to spend Christmas with the family in 1996, came forward to say that she had seen what happened. It was very clear to Ariana that Ian's arms had deep scratches on them, but what she found next made her very suspect. The black coat Ian was said to have been wearing when he was following Sophie around was soaking in a bucket in the shower. Worst of all, this coat wasn't in his house when the cops searched it. It had a mystery disappeared and may have been burned in the fire pit. Even though this was very important evidence, the probe never went anywhere because the Gardaí messed up important evidence and forced witnesses like Farrell to lie. Next, in 2014, Ian sued the Irish government for targeting him without a good reason. Marie Farrell testified, but later changed what she said, which hurt the case even more. Ian was constantly being looked at by the law and the people, even though he tried to clear his name. In 2019, Ian's trial started without him being there. The case would be heard by 3 judges only. There would be no jury. More than 30 people from the town heard on the last day of Ian Bailey's trial. Ian was given a 25-year prison term after being found guilty. He was charged with willful murder, major assault and battery against Sophie, and a European arrest warrant was issued. But in 2020, the High Court said that Ian would not be sent back to France because there wasn't enough proof. Ian was still told he would be arrested if he left Ireland, but he kept saying he was innocent.
My view was this. Take my DNA, test it against the DNA you found, and you will find it isn't mine.
Would you be happy to submit your DNA now again in 2017?
I don't have to. I'm not being asked to, but in principle, I wouldn't have an objection.
In late 2017, he offered to give a DNA sample, but no official request was made. Ian said that French prosecutors could watch over his trial in Ireland, which showed that he was ready to work with others. The cops would lose their only suspect, though, which no one saw coming. Ian Bailey died in West Cork, Ireland, on January 21, 2024. He may have had a heart attack. He still says he is innocent, and his sudden death has left the case with more questions than solutions. But Sophie's son keeps going back to the cottage in Ireland. There, he finds peace and feels his mother's spirit in the place she loved the most.
It says, even if the train is late, the train will arrive at the station. I'm 35. I will wait for the justice to be done. And justice will be done one day. For sure.
We want to send our deepest condolences to Sophie Toscan du Plantier's family and loved ones before we end the film. Even though there have been convictions and new leads, the case is still a mystery. Sophie's son is finding comfort in her beloved house. Investigations are still going on as the search for answers goes on, even after years. Thanks for watching. This cold case was full of surprises and left everyone speechless when the truth was found. Subscribe for more true crime stories, and don't forget to stay alert and stay safe. See you in the next video.